Squeeze that in. Okay. This is what we got. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I'm State Representative Dan Knodel, 24th Assembly District, and the Assistant Majority Leader. And I've been involved with the prevailing wage reform discussion since my first term 6 years ago. Began with a call from my Uncle Rick, who is a town chairman, and asked if we could do something with prevailing wage so that he could repair an extra mile of road every year in his township. And with some of the ideas in this proposal that we have today, he's going to be able to accomplish that. So ever since then, this really is the road to full repeal is the road that I've been on, and we're going to make a step here and put this proposal forward today. I'll briefly go over a bit of a summary of the package, and then we do have experts here who have been in the contracting business. Representative Culp, Representative Larson have dealt with prevailing wage in their private sector businesses. They're very familiar with it, and I think could answer specific questions for you. So again, thank you all for coming. We are introducing a package of reforms to change the way prevailing wage is determined today. And this will apply to all state highway and state bridge projects. Projects bid or negotiated by state or local government, including school districts, according to certain thresholds. 48,000 single trade, 100,000 multiple trade, or 234,000 multi-trade for city and village with a population less than 2,500 for a town. We look at this as the best possible package that can produce meaningful reforms. I've been a full repeal person. I also want to see something that can become law that addresses prevailing wage. This package we're putting forward, I am very positive that it can become law, and we'll continue to work with the Senate, and we look forward to the Senate coming forward should they have any other specific further exemptions or more a deeper a path towards full repeal. So we're open to what the Senate may come forward with. The result that we're after here is taxpayer savings. 60% of public projects will be free of the prevailing wage, according to DWD. Our new threshold for all projects will be $450,000, and that's the threshold that will help towns with some of their road projects. The legislation would index the thresholds every 4 years. Many new project exemptions will be tech colleges. Projects are funded by donations, and residential and agricultural projects. It fixes the formula to make the wages reflect the real wages in that community, which will greatly help rural areas and decrease wages. It simplifies the process and paperwork for more business participation, which would again help set a wage that better reflects the wages of the area and drive down the wage. It's not just the wages that add to the prevailing wage, the higher cost that we often see in prevailing wage projects. There's a lot of administrative work that has to be done by the contractors, by the governmental body. And those administrative costs add to the total cost. And those are all passed on to taxpayers. So we want to have some relief in that particular burden as well. The gentleman that we have here today can talk about specifically those administrative burdens and costs to their businesses and how this can provide some relief there. And there's no question those costs are passed on to the taxpayers. If there's a school building built on one side of the street for a public school district, same school building built on the other side of the street for a private school, there's going to be a difference in cost. And prevailing wage is going to be the factor. There can even be animosity amongst employees. If a contractor is doing both those jobs, the employees are going to have a little animosity. Who's working on the public sector project, and how come I'm over here on the private sector project? I may be able to get another $1 or $2 an hour on the public sector project. So it's been a very challenging area, and I think these reforms will begin that road to repeal. And again, I want to wrap up on my end of things with that. I look forward to the Senate and their continued work to come forward and see if they have other ideas to add to this package. And with that, we're going to go to a couple of our colleagues here. Bob, you want to start? Bob can address some of the specifics.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Bob Culp. Not used to having 32 cameras and half a dozen microphones in my face. I'm a roofing contractor outside of this building. It's what I've done for 30 years. In fact, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary doing that. For the last 15 or 20 years, we've done a lot of prevailing wage projects. In fact, right now we're working on 3 of them simultaneously. And this package is something that is very substantive. It is the kind of thing that will dramatically change the landscape, not only for contractors, but it'll also save a lot of money for public entities that now have to pay prevailing wage. It'll take a lot of mystery out of the way the wages are set, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds. I'd be willing to take questions, but we literally have a wastewater treatment plant that we're involved in that is in a city that's on a county line. It's a block from one county to the other, and this happens to be in Marathon County. The prevailing wage rate for our line of work for the metal roofing aspect of that is $51 an hour. If it were literally a block and a half away, it'd be $21 an hour. So you can see, and I could point out again and again, with 2 schools we're working on 30 miles apart. One of them is $25 an hour for wage rate. The other is $35 an hour for wage rate. Dan mentioned that you have animosity in between crews. I'm experiencing that this morning, actually, before I left the office. That is about how broken the system is. But the idea of this whole thing is this is, as Dan said, something that can pass. The truth of it is, this is substantive. If I look back at the last couple of years in my business, it would have excluded every one of the projects that we were involved in because they would be below the threshold. So again, it's substantive. I believe it's something that can pass, and I'd be willing to take questions after the program or at whatever point it's appropriate. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being here today. This is very exciting to see this much interest. And all these microphones are a bit intimidating. I too am a contractor, electrical contractor, have been for about well over 20 years. And we're a rather small contractor, and over the past years we have done some prevailing wage work. But because of the previous speakers talked about the animosity, we have basically almost quit doing prevailing wage work because of the problem we have with employees who some are getting a better deal than others. And when you have problems like that, and when you get those morale standards are being dealt with, I mean, and once you create a situation like that, you can't fix it. You can't fix it with money. You can't fix it with anything. It just has to. Time has to heal it. It's kind of like someone dying in the family. You just wait for time to heal it. So it's really a big deal. We have, like I said, we have mostly quit doing prevailing wage work because of that, and because of all the paperwork. We still do the reporting every year that's required to come up with the prevailing wage rate for each county. We still do that, even though we haven't done much prevailing wage work in recent years. We do that because we feel it's an obligation to us to help with that. That particular process of coming up with the wage rate is very complex, and in my book isn't really fair. They throw out the bottom half of the numbers. So if you are a contractor who doesn't pay like the big contractors, why do the paperwork? Why do this reporting if they're going to throw your numbers out anyway? So there's reasons why we're not getting accurate numbers there, what's actually a prevailing wage. The prevailing wage as it's done right now is not really a prevailing wage at all. It's something above prevailing wage. And so this bill will address that, at least to some effect. And there are a lot of good things in this bill that I think that I think that we can pass. The big thing about it is the part that's good for the public is that it saves money for the public. And I don't believe that we as a government should be involved in making laws that make, what's the word I'm looking for, that create a better situation for one group of contractors than another, or that favors them in any way, shape, or manner. There's something magical. There's something really magical about competition. So with that, I guess I'll let someone else speak.
You take your glasses. I move yours. Close yours.
Nope.
Well, good morning, and thanks everybody for being here today. As you heard, we have a good group of legislators who have been talking about this topic for months. If any of you listen to the radio, you might have heard some commercials that mention my name over and over and over about having the assembly vote. The problem has not been in the assembly trying to find an answer. We are standing here today because we have an answer. We believe that we have a substantive, meaningful reform that can pass both chambers and be signed into law by Governor Walker. Now, in every single reform effort, there are some who say, if I don't get everything, I'll take nothing. That has never been where I have been as a legislator, and it's never been where Assembly Republicans have stood. We have always stood for the biggest, boldest reforms that are possible. In fact, to paraphrase what William F. Buckley said, I'll take the most conservative reforms that can actually pass. And that's what this proposal is. The proposal does an awful lot toward heading down the path that many conservatives in Wisconsin want, which is to find taxpayer savings, do it in a way that makes it better for small business. And that's one of the most important parts of this process. When we sat down with the members of our caucus who've actually done prevailing wage work, you listen to their stories, and it's mostly the stories of small businesses all across the state who are frustrated with regulations. Having a threshold set at $450,000 means almost all work in townships will be exempt. It means that the vast majority of repair and maintenance projects statewide will be exempt, and it means an awful lot of small projects done by contractors who are smaller, more nimble, and more able to get the job done in a cost-effective way will be accomplished. Under this proposal, Wisconsin would have one of the highest thresholds in the nation. That's a benefit to all of the contractors in Wisconsin and the tax-paying public. One of the most important things, too, is that if we assume that there are going to be savings, I think most of us know that there will be, but there's no quantitative study that actually shows whether or not that actually will occur. So in this proposal, we also have a study that will take place in 4 years that will demonstrate clearly whether or not there are or are not savings based on the real-world experience with these changes going into effect. It'll no longer be a discussion of one study paid for by one group, another study paid for by a different group. It'll be actually run by the state of Wisconsin to guarantee that the results are accurate and they can be utilized not just in Wisconsin, but all around the country as efforts to reform prevailing wage move forward. Many of the projects that have been brought up would be exempt under this proposal. The water tower in Mequon, West Bend's proposal, saying that we have the wastewater treatment plant in Lake Mills, all kinds of different examples that have been brought up by some of the conservative media. Almost all of those would be exempt under this proposal. That's why we are prepared to take this forward. We are hopeful that it actually begins the discussion because we have waited now literally 30 days for the Senate to say they have the votes for a package, and still as of today, we don't see where the 17 votes are to make reforms to prevailing wage. We have the votes today to pass this package. We are ready to do so, and we will look forward to engaging our Senate colleagues to see if they actually have a proposal in writing that can get 17 votes in their chamber. We have one. We'll wait for theirs. So any other comments? If not, we'll be happy to answer questions.
Robin, what is it? I mean, we've heard a lot about what's bad about this bill, about this current law. What's good about it that's worth saving today?
Well, we're not saving aspects of the law. We're actually focusing on reform. And that's why when you look and say nearly 60% of the projects would be exempt, that's a major step forward. Now, once again, there are some who will say if we can't have everything, we should stand for nothing. That's not where Republicans have ever been. We make incremental reforms where possible. Even during Act 10, we sat down and we didn't repeal collective bargaining and ban it for every single employee. We sat down, we had a reasoned discussion. We came out with a proposal that has saved billions of dollars under Act 10. But it wasn't the original proposal, and it wasn't either my way or the highway. This is a proposal that will make substantive reforms that will head us down a path toward potentially having a repeal in the future, but it's not going to happen today.
How many votes do you have in your caucus? caucus for this plan?
We caucused on it last week. I think that if it's fair to say, we definitely have 50 plus. So I know we can pass this plan in our chamber.
Republicans are going to take a hit on this issue one way or the other from certain special interest groups. They're not going to like reform. How are you going to justify to the citizens of Wisconsin that a threshold of $450,000 is good to save money on below that threshold, but it's not good to save money on projects above that threshold?
Well, this is what can actually get done, and I have spent a ton of time in my district. I was at a dairy breakfast where literally thousands of people came by me over the course of the weekend. More people brought up teacher licensure and some of our changes to teacher licensure than brought up prevailing wage. So I know for some taxpayers this is a very important issue, but it's not the most important issue in the state budget. And that's why what we want to do is make substantive reforms that can push the ball down the field, but also realize there are a lot of discussions that we have to have in order to conclude this budget. So from my perspective, I would say to taxpayers, 60% of projects being exempt is a heck of a lot better than zero, which if I had to bet today, the Senate doesn't have 17 votes for anything.
Rob, so those packages can pass, does that pass your house or pass the Senate?
I believe for sure it can pass our house.
Is the votes you can get in your house? Could you get full repeal in your house if you put it to a vote?
I don't know. I think that if we saw that the votes were there in the state Senate, we would have that discussion. We have had the discussion in our caucus. I have a sizable number of people who want full repeal and a good number of people who want reforms. So the goal is to get the most that we possibly can and then continue the discussion, which is why we have the study in there. It automatically increases thresholds over time. It has a council that's going to be created with some of the various stakeholders that are here in front of us to talk about simplifying the process, making it much more effective to not have all the cumbersome forms and all that. So that's where we're looking and saying it's a major reform effort.
What's the dollar amount that would be the share of the dollar amount of total public works projects that would be affected? You got 60% by number, but by cash. What's the amount?
We looked at the total number of projects. I don't know that answer.
Is there a transportation plan that's connected to this in your budget project? What do you have the votes to pass on transportation?
We also caucused last week on transportation. We have a process that I believe that we are at a good answer for transportation. We are waiting again for our Senate colleagues to come forward with their transportation answer. We're going to caucus again on Wednesday. The Senate is caucusing on Tuesday, so we hope that they'll take some of our ideas that we've presented, have that discussion inside their caucus, and then come back to us with an answer. If not, we're going to caucus again on Wednesday, and the Assembly is not just going to stand around waiting for the Senate to get their act together.
What is the votes to them? What's the plan that you propose to the Senate? Transportation.
The plan to present to them talks about, and I'm not going to get into all the details of transportation because today we're talking about prevailing wage reforms. But we have put a proposal in front of the state Senate. We have actually put many proposals in front of the state Senate trying to see where they could get the votes to get to 17, and we're still waiting for an answer.
With the problem on prevailing wages in the Senate, why is the Assembly having a press conference today and not the Senate?
Well, you could ask that about a whole lot of different topics, right? The Assembly has always been the place where we try to lead and find answers to problems, rather than having a proposal that is only being discussed behind closed doors. We wanted to unveil our proposal because we're proud of it. You see people standing up here saying we want to actually get something done. We're going to do the exact same thing on other announcements this week that you will be able to see by the end of the week exactly where the Assembly stands. And my hope is that the Senate will follow, letting us know exactly what their positions are so we can have that discussion in the public.
Rob, when you say you won't wait, does that mean that you might have Assembly Finance meet on its own, pass the budget, go to the floor, put pressure on the Senate to act?
That is always a possibility if we don't see movement in the Senate.
Why do you want to exempt part of the prevailing wage information from the Open Records Law?
What we would do is we would actually allow DWD and the contractors, DWD and local governments to have access to that. So they would be the ones who are actually discussing the property, the improvements to the property, or the repairs and maintenance. So
Why not the public have access?
Well, because we don't want to allow certain interest groups who have made a living off of going after contractors with basically union-funded techniques. So we wanted to do that. That was one of the requests of contractors, to say that this should be a contract between a local government and a contract between the contractor. If the local government has problems, they have every right to bring it forward, talk about it, to be able to say that the rules aren't being followed. But we don't want to allow special interest groups the opportunity to go after contractors.
Who did you work with on this proposal? Industry, companies, groups, who advised you on this?
Yeah, we actually started down that path, but you're right. There are all kinds of people in all different places, which is why we relied a lot more on our own members who have their own experience as opposed to working with any interest groups on whatever
All right,
side.
thank you, everyone. I have the bill draft right here, and you can take a hold of it when you head out, and also the press release. So thank you, everyone.
Cool.